next week in San Francisco, there's going to be an annual meeting of the American Society of Information Sciences. And we're scheduled to put on a presentation there, very much like the one we're putting on here tonight. And as you'll find out subsequently, it's really rather complex in the machinery and the timing to put it on, and we very much need real live rehearsals. So tonight is our realest, livest rehearsal for that meeting. And we really hope that it turns out well, but you may expect severe breakdowns because there's really a lot of equipment, a lot of people coupled into all of this. So the views you've been seeing are part of the other people and the other equipment. And let's get going with the real presentation. Bill, are you ready? Let's go. Right. For a little while, pretend like I have a complicated slide projector. And later I'll show you what's there besides that. And I have a pointer that I can use to point to the agenda that makes up the introduction for the talk. And the first item has already been covered. You've had some views of a laboratory from whence all of this machinery and the presentations we're going to have has evolved. Let me go next and describe to you how this presentation is set up. Slide projector takes me to show me a picture, and it's a very rough schematic of the computer setup that we have back in our laboratory, where the computer is coupled to a large disk file in which we can store a great deal of information, and there's some other equipment that we've built that couples to the computer that allows it to drive 6 displays that can put on their screens just what you're seeing up here. And we sit at consoles and work at this a good deal. But the next view shows how any one of those consoles is organized. That actually there's a little display derived on a small display tube by the computer, and there's a television camera that looks at that and pipes a television image off to the display, and the man sits there and looks at a television monitor. But he also has operating controls that feed into this special equipment, and the computer is instantly aware of every control action he does and takes some appropriate action, usually changing the image that the computer creates on the display. Well, for today's purpose, we've replaced the display and the workstation of the individual as follows. We take the TV camera signal and pipe it over a special kind of coupling to a remote place such as this, and have it drive a TV projector that's at the back of the room, and that casts the beam on the screen. That's just what we would normally see at the screen of our workstation, and it's such as that I have in front of me right now that I'm looking at. And then we have the controls, normal controls, going to special coupling equipment that we built over a phone line through another set, so that at this interface, the computer thinks that it's working with a local working station, just as it is back in the laboratory. But we're able to give you the chance of seeing on this large screen what I can manipulate here. That's just as the way I would work at a working station back home. So I say, please take me back to my agenda. And the next item is a little bit about who and what we are and why we're presenting this. Well, AHIRC, you'll see these initials quite a bit through the meeting, and it stands for the Augmented Human Intellect Research Center. It's located at Stanford Research Institute, and it's organizationally at what you call a group level. We want to point out we're not the only group working on this man-machine communications, but we work quite intensively with sort of activity directed in a special ways you'll see here that follows. About 24 people, very special laboratory facilities that we have, include a computer that's dedicated for our use, the 6 CRT display stations, a line printer that can print out material upper and lower case, very large disk file, and some magnetic tape units that can store much information as a background. And we really need to point out that we get our support for this rather expensive enterprise from 3 different government agencies, and in the past several others have contributed quite a bit, and we owe them a great deal. So we really like to point out and emphasize, and we'll try to do it later to more degree, that it's really a goal-oriented pursuit. We have long-range goals, and every year we're closer to them, we hope. And what we're presenting to you today is the current stage of it. And we like to emphasize that everything we're showing you is subject to evolutionary development in the next year. So that is just briefly, as much as we want to tell you who we are, a group at SRI. And we'd like to orient the rest of the talk more or less to the sort of interests that this American Society of Information Systems, or Sciences, holds in relationship to our pursuits. So we have some presentation here that can sort of show that relationship. They, as well as we, are very much interested in information systems. We characterize it by saying such a system usually brings in source material of various kinds of information, and it provides at its output information or services relative to that. We also are very much interested in the process of developing such systems, and so is the society. The people there are trying to develop improved systems to store the large quantities of information that our libraries needed. So where we begin to get a special cast to our activities is that the type of information system we're busy developing is one that's built to augment system developers. It's a system that augments system developers, and that's our pursuit. And part of our staff is employed in developing such a system, and part in using it and providing services. Well, what sorts of services? Well, it's tools, techniques, etc., for augmenting a system development activity. Well, let's carry that a little step further to show you how we apply that. And we get sort of involuted here. We take that output and feed it back here, so that part of our staff that's busy developing a system makes use of all these tools that we're building. And the information that goes in is the working material for this information system that we're building is that which we generate in the pursuit of our activities. So that's really quite an involuted activity. We can draw a box around it and say, this is the AHI Research Center. But it has an output, even though it's strongly feedback-oriented here. We do feel that we have an output to the world, and that's producing these kind of materials, information about the tools and techniques for other people who might be interested in making better system development teams. Now, there are various relationships I'll try to show later on in the presentation where this sort of activity plays specific parts as being relevant for the people interested in building very large information systems. The information system we build and work on here is rather small, and it contains essentially our own generated information that we need in the course of our activity. So we say it's strongly oriented towards what a design team needs for its uses. And you'll see that all the way through. We're a design team. We're trying very hard to build tools and techniques that improve our own capability. And we like to think that we can provide other design teams on the outside with some of the folklore and guidance about how they may improve their capability also. All right. So a system development augmentation system, what are the main components for that for us? So we can look here and see, well, hardware, system programmer software, computer systems, subsystems we call them, the sorts of things you can call on for the computer to do for you that are oriented in the user's language and terms. And we'll spend quite a bit of time here talking about some of these and showing them to you. Then the concepts, conventions, and methods by which people make use of these subsystems are a very important part of what we call an augmentation system. You can provide many elegant computer aids for yourself, but not until you adapt the concepts and your methods of work and thinking to these special tools do you really begin to get the power from it. And that sort of thing we can only get across to you by the examples that you'll see through the presentation tonight. For system programmers, we just invite you to come back later and ask us about the special purpose languages that we have here. And we want to spend most of our time talking about these general user subsystems in here, of which NLS, our online system, using a cathode ray tube display, is really the one we'll spend the most time on. We have a system that can work with offline by person punching paper tape. Another system we're bringing along that's oriented for use at a typewriter to work on the same kinds of information that we use here, and a special graphic-oriented output system that we'll discuss a little bit with you later. So, we're going to launch fairly soon into trying to give you a picture of this thing that is moving information around on the screen. That's one of our main tools. But first I'd like to deal with the sorts of ways we control this. One way in which we'll emphasize a little bit that we like to think of what this system does for us, these computer aids, is provide us with a very special, powerful vehicle by which we can move through information space with a great deal of mobility and speed and flexibility, and then as we get to different points in this information space, we can construct interesting views for ourselves or make significant manipulations in that information. But this vehicle needs to be controlled. So let me give you a few minutes of just the basic control mechanisms that are made available to us, and then we'll go ahead and show you some of the maneuvers that this vehicle can do. All right. The first novel thing here is the device at my right that controls the pointing, by which I point to things displayed on the screen and communicate to the computer that that's of significance to me. And it's a fairly simple device that at the bottom has a couple of wheels, one that's oriented crossways and the other here that's oriented vertically. And this one rolls on a surface and controls only the up and down position of the spot. This one rolls the horizontal, and it's a peculiar quirk in the way they roll or slide that the horizontal one will rotate really an amount proportional to how far I tend to go on a... If I go straight horizontal, it moves that way, straight vertical, but if I go at some angle, so will it. So I can sit here and move this and point quite accurately, and I never look down at my hand. I'm looking at that spot on the screen that we call a bug, and this thing we call a mouse. They've been with us long enough so these names are carved in stone now. So on the top of it there's several control buttons that are used at different times in the control maneuvers here. In the middle is a typewriter-like keyboard, and every time I strike a key the computer knows it instantly and responds. And the inner portion of that is exactly like a typewriter, and the outer zones have some special keys that we have to tell the computer about things different from normal inputs. And the device over here is a very special feature of ours, but it really duplicates completely the function available at the central keyboard, and it does it by the user striking combinations of the keys. And one has to learn these chord or codes to hit the combinations that give the particular keys, but that really turns out to be a matter of only a few hours practice, really. And you can see this sort of advantage it gives you, that when I'm pointing, many times I can give short commands and controls here, and I don't have to take my hands off the controls or my eyes off the screen to do it. So, for instance, there are simple commands like delete a character, and I can pick a character and delete it. Pick the A and delete it, or insert another one there. So I'm giving short commands and pointing and giving button operations. Now there's something going on at the top of the screen that needs a little bit of description. And that we usually have quite a bit of feedback information sitting up there that tells the operator what's going on with his vehicle. That's much like the instrument panel on the vehicle. For instance, if I want to delete a word, I hit 2 small characters, and they're shown here, D and W. The computer responds by saying, I assume you want to delete a word. Is that right? I can go ahead or not. But it tells me what maneuver the computer thinks I want to do. And we'll describe these others a little bit later. But one thing I'll have to ask you to be careful about through this presentation is a lot of information flashes across the screen, and much of it are like the turning of pages intermediate between points you're looking at in a reference manual, and we filter that out as we go. We don't look at the intermediate pages, but you don't have the skill in knowing when they're intermediate pages and when there's something you're supposed to look at, and we'll try to give you indications through the evening, but we know that often it's very hard for people. So I like to run by saying to the I have trouble talking and working at the same time. I like to tell the computer to put that feedback down to a minimum for a while so it won't distract you. And what changes up there, you can ignore for a while. All right, let me just show you if I type from here, you see the words appear there, and I can type from here too. And I can get numbers if I want to, or other special characters and symbols, or just say throw it all away. All right, that's enough. Let's get on with another feature here that we'll use quite a bit, and that's what we call a collaborative technique. Now, you saw on the screen before I started talking images of other people working at workstations in our laboratory, and we have it set up so we can from time to time work with each other between these things. So that's what I like to do, is call in Dave Evans working back in our laboratory. There he is now. And hi, Dave.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we were going to start working together, we would get coupled first with some sort of audio intercom system.
Hello.
That's provided. Yes. Don't talk yet. I'm still talking. So another sort of thing we need to do too is he has information on his screen, and we would both like to look at it for a while. So I would make some maneuvers and get the same image duplicated on my screen soon. And we'll be doing that in a moment, just as soon as the people respond to the cues and give you that sort of a video picture. Let's see a picture of his face perhaps first. But there are... let's have a shot of his face.
Not that bad, is it?
Yeah. So give a face view to introduce the man first. And we'll be working as though we're trying to share a blackboard. Well, he works on one blackboard, I work on another. First, we're going to share his blackboard. So we say, all right, let's see the blackboard or the display screen of text that he was working with, and we can get that on the screen as a first step into our collaborating. So that's his blackboard there, and we'd say he can show me things and we can talk back and forth, but I'm sort of powerless. I can try to say, hey, I want to talk about that thing up there or over there. I'd like to point too. So we have a facility for doing that. So I asked the man if you'd be so kind as to give me a pointer.
Okay. What's your number over there, Doug?
21, I think.
21. Okay.
So he's saying coupled to station 21.
There you are.
So I'm coupled in here, and first we can play tag.
Hold still and I'll swat you.
Yes. Bug fight, see? So anyway, you can tell the difference. I'm the pretty bug. Anyway, so now we're equipped that it's his blackboard, his chalk, but I have a pointer, and we can communicate and talk. and we can choose to have his video image superposed on his text so that I really have a feeling of discussing with him. So let's go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, you know, I was trying to move it, and it's your text. You have
Yeah,
it.
it's my text.
All right. So what we're going to have Dave do for 15 minutes or something like that is he and I work together, but mostly be at his show, to go in and show some of the basic maneuvers and characteristics of this vehicle here that we're talking about, this NLS. So you start from there, Dave, and go a while.
Okay. The way that I want to proceed to describe to you the basic characteristics of NLS, which is a mnemonic for the online system, is to run through a little nursery rhyme with you. And this is a very simple example, and the idea is that you don't have to read it, but you can get some feeling for the way that we're working with the text and structuring the information and using NLS as an instrument in what we might call information space. Now, I'm just going to, at the moment, as you see here, I've got this nursery rhyme all together in one, it looks like a paragraph. Really, it's a thing we call the statement.
Did you hear me advertise that we were going to show them our work material?
Well, this is, of course, what we do during the day. The books are around here somewhere, I think. Well, this is sort of relaxation, and it's evening time. And we'll find that it's really hard work anyway. First of all, to make it sort of useful, let's break it up into the verses, or into at least the sentences. Doug's mentioned that up the top of the screen you'll see feedback information about commands, so don't pay too much attention to that at the moment. Just watch the text down here. I'm just going to break it up into smaller pieces, so you'll start to see the you'll start to see a familiar-looking thing. We're starting to get down the bottom of the display, so one of the things we can do is sort of get rid of that intervening line there. So now we're closer together, and I'll just continue breaking this up. I'm just separating it out, of course, into pieces. Someone else is on the system. So there we have, you see now there's the very familiar nursery rhyme. Now see at the left-hand side here there are a bunch of numbers indicating that in fact all these pieces of information are sort of separate things that we call statements, the same sort of level as far as the system is concerned as the whole lump we saw before. We can manipulate these pieces as sort of entities in their own right. Now I can have them displayed with or without the numbers on. For instance, I can just type an N and the numbers have gone. But one of the things we like to do, I'll go to the front of the file again. Remember, this was the top line now is the line you saw when we first came in. I'd like to break this into verses, so I'll insert a new statement. And I just typed insert statement and selected the top statement that's already there. Now I'm going to type in some information, some heading information for the new statement. Verse 1. And if I think, well, there may be two verses in this, so I'll copy that statement. And I say, after that statement, which has got the text verse 1 in it, copy it again. So we'll see the information's copied. Now I'd like to replace that word with another word, the word to. So we're starting to see some sort of basic editing operations. I'll turn the numbers back on so you can see them. And I'll close it up again, just get rid of that intervening line. Now we're going to move some text around, and there's some very, very flexible ways to do this. For instance, I move a group of statements towards the statement called verse 1, which I'll now select. I'm going to move the one numbered 4 down through, heavens, I used to know this nursery rhyme words. I think the first verse ends there. And instead of just moving up to it, I'll move it under it. So now we have a sort of a hierarchy started where verse 1 contains this, and I'll perform the same operations here to move the second lot underneath the title verse 2. Now, this can illustrate now one of the very powerful things that NLS allows you to do. You can close the display up so that you see only the top level of something. Now we only see just the names of the verses, and I can say, now I'd like to put this verse 2 at the top of the display and open it up so I actually see or let's do verse 1, so I actually see the substructure, the information underneath it. So I go jump to item, I select that statement, and I enter another, what we call a view specification, with the key set, and execute the command. Now the first verse is at the top of the display, and showing the statement verse 1 is at the top of the display, and all the lines in verse 1 are shown underneath it. I'll turn the numbers off again, and I'll get rid of the rest of it, just so we can work with verse 1. Now I might like to now go in and...
When you got rid of it, you didn't throw it away, did you?
Oh, well, we sort of threw it just to the side. I just turned it off so you don't see it, so we can concentrate on verse 1. I'm going to read it now and be a literary critic or something. And I come into this one here and say, merry old soul, heavens, I say, merry. What about jolly? That's a much better word. And where is it? I don't see it. Well, see, it's really there. It's just hidden. It's the next level down. If I put the numbers on again, we start to see that you can actually build a hierarchy and control how much of that hierarchy you see. If I was looking, say, at just that line, and I wanted to know what verse it was in, I could say, well, it's under a heading. It's probably under a heading with the name of the verse on it. So I'll say jump to up. That's sort of up to the heading under which this statement is contained. So jump to up, select the statement, and I see verse 1 appears. There are many, many operations like this around the structure. One of the interesting ones is, go back to the beginning of the file again now, move down another level. I'm going to move underneath the introductory statement, both of these things. So we have now 4 levels deep. See, I'll clip it back to just 3. There's an interesting new command called substitute branch. And old King Cole was a merry old soul. Well, sometimes you like to play around with poetry and change the way that it was written. So we'll say, for the words merry old soul, substitute, let's think something creative. Well, now we've got a different poem. You see on the top line there, old King Cole's no longer a merry old man.
You know, I'm not sure there isn't something personal in that.
No. This probably reflects something that happened to me when I was very young or something. Another thing we might like to do is, after this, there might be some editorial changes I want to make, and I want to make them in many parts of the file. Say I want to change it from King Cole to King Cole II. Well, there are many ways I can do that, and one is that I can type in something like the second and say, let's freeze that. And there's a command called freeze statement. I select the statement and hit an O, and it appears now at the top of the display with a line underneath it, and it will stay there no matter what I do down below. See, I play around any way I like down the bottom, and the frozen statement stays at the top. So then if I wanted to, say, copy that information after King Cole, I just select Cole and select in between those 2 words, and I now have King Cole II, and down the bottom here, King Cole II. Now these are very, very trivial examples, but they illustrate some of the sort of flexibility that NLS offers you to move around structures that contain information, be it simple like this or very, very complex. I'll now go and just sort of leave that as a basic introduction to some of the structural moves, the structural operations and the text operations available in NLS, and go into some more realistic situations. Yes, Dave?
Are you going to talk about the numbers and names?
Oh, yes. Well, I've shown you that statements have numbers, and you can display them or not, but there's one other thing you can do. Say down here, I gave this last statement here, 1B6, or the last one in this little group, a name. Let's, what do we call it? XXX or something very creative like that. And the name of a statement is defined as the first thing in parenthesis in the statement. So the first string of text, if it's in parenthesis, in fact. And so if I'm somewhere else in the file now, and I say, and see now I've changed the view so you can't see that statement. It's off the display, but I know it's there and I know it's named XXX, and I want it at the top of the display. What I do is say jump to name, and I type in the name, XXX, and if the IDFOR is performing, you'll see that at the top of the screen. And now I execute the command, and it appears at the top of the display. So a name is a way to get something there indirectly without having to select it automatically. You can switch names on and off. You can switch it off by there we have control whether you see them or not, because if they're long names, it interferes with the text. So let me oops, it's back on again. I want to now go to another file and something like here. Oops. How's that? Do you want the numbers on or off? Let's switch them off.
Yeah.
What we've been doing, we just went to another file and explain about files now. We were just looking at the internal structure and the operations that NLS offers for internal operations within a file. And this represents a file, and there's a hierarchy within that file. You only saw 3 or 4 levels deep in the hierarchy there, but you can go many levels deep. Now, the thing with the system we work with is that we don't work with one file. We work with many files, and we're represented here by many boxes. Now, these files are divided up into domains that are owned by individuals. There has to be a way to sort of allocate ownership of the information. So it's done in something that we might call a user bin. I'm the user Evans, and I own those files, and this is Doug Engelbart's, and he owns those, and so on. Just the idea that there are users that own files, and there are many files.
Where are those files?
Well, they're sort of up in the room about 50 yards up the up the corridor, sitting on a disk store.
Yeah, I guess we should tell our audience that all those files are information contained in computer-held form. Right.
Yeah, they're not inside a filing cabinet, but the same sort of term is used, and the analogy with a file in a normal filing cabinet is okay as long as you don't think of the thing as a physically existing entity. Okay, we have two files here. One of the main issues is to communicate between them. We've shown you operations within them. Now the problem of going between them. Well, the thing we use for inter-file communication is called a link, and it's I'll demonstrate it to you in a moment. It's an operation that allows you to go from the content within one file to the content within another. And the links are not limited to just 2 files, but to any pair of files, and they can be within user bins or across user bins. I'll show you what a link looks like. This entity here within the parenthesis is an NLS text link, and I could have just put this in, but I happen to have it stored there. I could have just typed it in from the keyboard. Now what we have here is that's the name of the user, the owner of the file. That's the name of the file itself. This number 1 is a location within that file, and this information here is controls what view you see. I was showing you before the way to fold the file up. Well, this will do the same sort of thing. For instance, the M there will enable me to display the numbers when I get to the location that this refers to. This is like a reference, C. Einstein, 1925, except you can execute it and go and look at the reference that is being referred to. And let me